All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's break down the LEC playoffs. Incredible results. I wouldn't say a big upset. I would say a pretty solid upset, in both results. Fnatic losing to G2, KC losing to Koi. We always knew the top four was very, very competitive. If I had a machine where I could combine the strengths of the top four, I could make a mean team to go to MSI and actually be very competitive because I could make a team with KC's team fighting, Koi's, hive mind gameplay in terms of being on the same page. I feel like that's the biggest strength of Koi is that they are very, very committed behind the decisions they make, which I really, really like about them. Fnatic's early game, and then G2's macro discipline. I think if I could make a freak team with all of those four strengths, we would have a team that could compete for a potential MSI spot. Because I think all these elements from these teams are areas where they compete with the absolute best. But they are lacking in all of the other areas, like KC, for example, in terms of the early games, is lacking. Koi has strong early games, but I do think that their mid to late in decision making can, of course, be very, very improved. Even though I think Koi's mid to late in decision making has gotten better and better. Fnatic, very, very strong early games, but they kind of lose their mind and lose their head when they're in strong positions. They kind of want more, and Humanoid keeps getting caught, and you have situations where, of course, Razork is overreaching for his engages. And then, of course, G2, who among in this weekend, right, is the biggest winner. G2, in terms of their collective thinking, that's the main thing that they've been working on. So let's start with G2. G2, incredible weekend, winning 2 BO5s. I think the main thing for me is very, very good draft read, very good draft prep for them individually. But I think the biggest point of criticism and also the biggest point of improvement is just how Labrov and Skumond actually played together. I think it was very, very nice to see Skumond showing a very deep range of champions. I think a big detail that we saw from both G2 and Koi in the first opening match is that they showed the most amount of adaptations to, of course, 2510, the patch that was released. If you paid attention to the LCK, you could see that these changes were there. The big standouts were Trundle into tanks, and then, of course, the inclusion of Senna and a raised prior onto Lucian. And if we take a look at G2's prep, we had the Senna Nautilus coming through, which is a very, very big one. Really, really didn't like the Renata here. If you're going to end up on Zeri, I think they needed to pick Brom here. In terms of the read, I think Senna is incredibly strong. And then, of course, we had the Trundle angle that they played, where Trundle was an absolute menace in this one. And, of course, Razork was completely out of the loop, playing Aftershock Sejuani here, and couldn't make it happen. The same thing in the Koi series. If we pay attention to some of their champions that they dropped, we had, of course, the Trundle coming through. We had the Senna Nautilus also coming through. The Trundle into Scanner specifically, the Banjavan and Wukong. It seems like Koi and G2 were far more tapped in to what the trends were. But obviously, in such a short turnaround time, you need to, of course, have players that already have that profile. If we think about Kalist was rarely the one who played Senna, if never. Targamas was the Senna, and now farming Senna is, of course, what you want to play. The same thing for Upset. Upset was never a big Senna player. He never liked this champion, and there are certain champions that players just don't enjoy, and that's just how it is sometimes. Trundle came through, and I think the impressive aspect for me is that Skumond showed how he can adapt his playstyle to champions that can be considered a little bit more supportive. I really like that he put his own spin on it, so to speak. In terms of where Fnatic is as a team, I think that it's important that we finally come to terms. I don't like simplifying it and saying Fnatic are just playoff chokers. I think there is some degree of that, but I think if we take a look at LEC history in terms of where Fnatic have placed in the LEC, follow with me here on my theory. If we just go into LEC spring, and let's start from the 2023 season, and let's start from the summer season. Because the summer season, right, this is where they got Trimby and Noah. And let's check now if Fnatic for the longest time with this core, meaning Oscarinin and of course Razor Humanoid. My main point about this team is that I believe that they are just very, very good at beating down teams that are incohesive and not good. And this is how they draw you in. Fnatic is the epitome of peaking in high school type of team. This was 2023. Let's take a look at 2024. Oh, this is the wrong event. So here we had a weak group, 5-4, and they didn't even make it past Mad Lions in this one. So this was just a horrible split all around. Here Fnatic made first, and then they lost to G2, and then they won against BDS and made it to the finals. Here they made fourth, and they managed to beat GX, but beat SK, and then they beat G2. I guess my theory doesn't really make sense. But isolating the 2025 season, I do feel like Fnatic's gameplay patterns look pretty damn good when they're playing against teams that are weaker than them. Because I think if they create big enough leads, they can kind of outmuscle your opponent in a way that is extremely undisciplined. And I think that when they play against teams that are more cohesive, like in the case of G2 coming into this match, and G2 have that patience and they have that discipline to choose their moments and to find angles in, I do think that Fnatic tend to give away way too much. Still, I think Fnatic's early games, even in this series, looked pretty damn, decisive. Like their early games were very, very good. Especially, in this game, there was the Pantheon running amok, and then it led to the point where Razor was just over-engaging. Same thing in this one, right? Where Alyssa and Tarek were legit 2v2 diving the shit out of G2 and putting themselves in positions that just were one where Gwen's disadvantage against like the Jax here didn't really make a difference. And then it got to the point where finally you have this fight, let me just show you guys as a breakdown of this game in particular. You have that point in that game 3. You have a point in this game, right, where the fights that are being created by Fnatic, technically created, is basically them getting caught. The best fights Fnatic have is Humanoid getting caught and them somehow mechanically figuring it out. Because here, the fear landed onto Jax, and I think Humanoid is great mechanically. But the main issue always lies that they get these fight opportunities that they kind of just have to outplay. There is nothing that is planned about it. There is nothing that is, carefully constructed about it. There is no change of pacing regardless of the game state. And that is the biggest issue for Fnatic. I show you guys a later fight before, first and foremost, Humanoid just giving himself away. In this moment, of course, it's extremely painful to watch. Here, Humanoid is just on the mid-wave. He's on the mid-wave. His teammates are all basing. Tarek basing, Skarner farming camps, Kalista in base. Oscarin showing on vision. He sees Labro, feels safe because of it. And Skewmon just goes on to Humanoid. And Humanoid felt safe because he saw Rakan and bot. But Humanoid losing his flash and losing 1,000 gold to Xayah. Terrible, right? Terrible. Just unforced error after unforced error. But in the end, there's going to be this fight here on bottom side that once again begins with Fnatic, getting collapsed on. Take a look at where Gwen is, take a look at where the Skarner is, and it starts off with them kind of being caught in this position. Fnatic land a gorgeous Tarek ultimate, and then this Kalista ultimate that knocks up 3 here is absolutely crazy. Fnatic just outplaying and just mechanically playing super, super good, but putting themselves in this situation in the first place, where they give this opportunity to G2, I think that's the main thing that is just, concerning. And then finally on the conversion around a dragon where Gwen finally has great conditions, this is probably like the biggest issue that Fnatic are consistently facing. You have the situation here where Gwen is going to get blue trinketed, She does. I don't remember if she got blue tail, but basically she's hitting Drake, right? Here, he's hitting Drake, and if you're hitting Drake, let your let your range champion, throw spells. What's the rush? If you are playing off of the point where you are hitting the Drake, there's 2 points of breaching that you want to enter. I would rather have humanoid posturing here. I don't want him to be on this position. I think this is really, really bad. No reason for him to go into ramp. He should be here. And then they should play on the fact that they need to just rotate humanoid abilities. But what's the point of Razork slamming his abilities when he should just hold? If there's no threat on humanoid, he should be holding. There's no reason for him to ever go first. Never. They should just rotate humanoid spells and they should play. But I don't like that humanoid is in this position. He should be here, a more central point. And then if humanoid here on his Hui gets to rotate the spells 2-3 times, they've won the game. But instead the Fi plays fast. They burn Tarek ultimate. Jax is in Hourglass. And that's it. You don't get value from your Hui. Hui mispositioning and then snapping when your carry is under no threat is completely pointless, because the truth of holding position just doesn't really matter. I don't know, Humor is kind of cut off from the team. Same with Gwen. We have Gax here too. Now it's like Humanoid's inting. Here, like this position here is just bad. Like this should be a hard spot for them. Humanoid should be here. He has pink here. He should throw his spells. Like if he throws any spells here, it's already won. You know, the coach of Fnatic here says, go back to when we had T2. We need to keep poking them. Yeah, you can stand here. You can just posture and you can hit with your Hui. What's the point of playing a mage? It's just Fnatic time and time again. I feel like there is no thought process in regards to position. There's no thought process in regards to giving your champions value. Like every fight is so damn fast. It's like unless you guys are playing Vi or whatever, there seems to be a big problem in getting value out of mages, which is silly because Humanoid plays majority mages and is his best champions. But even in this position, if the enemy can walk up on mid-mid, you get the Q in here and we can just hold. The enemy has a very, very hard time face checking. They need to pay a price to enter. But Humanoid just cuts himself off for no reason. And Skarner snaps when it's not necessary. I think this is just a story of the Fnatic issue. I don't know how much they can solve in such a short time. I'm not so sure. I think if anything, Oscarini is just playing the wrong champs. I thought that Oscarini can get away with playing most champs, but he's playing so isolated. I don't know if it's Oscarini's fault or the team's fault that Oscarini is playing so isolated, but he should not be playing. He should not be playing Camille. He should be playing Gwen. He should be playing Rumble, Ornn, K'Sante, Poppy, Sion, and he should play in isolation. Because in any matchup that has any form of volatility, he just gets ganked once and it breaks apart completely. And I think if Fnatic is in positions where they don't have like as big of a lead as they did in that, game 3 with the Kalista Tarek, where they are diving and Gwen is 40 CS behind against Jax, that should be game losing. Really, really game losing. Let's move on to the conversation of KC, because we have the series coming up, right? It's starting. KC, for me, the biggest issue about KC is I think the draft priorities on mid are very off. I feel like Jojo Pyun was also always playing like the stronger champion in the game. I think this is not an easy Sylas game to play, and to Vi, Ari, Galio, Zyrel, I don't think that's an easy Sylas game to play at all. I think the fact that KC were permabanning, Azir was permabanned, but also in the opening game, they banned Talia on blue themselves, when in reality, they should actually trade these champions and be very, very happy to trade these champions if the enemy wanted to, with they first pick Talia and then play Azir, so they don't have to ban Azir themselves. The same thing as we proceed. KC here, I think the Yon draft is perfectly fine. This was the biggest confusion here, and I think the way KC play, they are incredibly sensitive to individual underperformances. Because I didn't think this was a good performance from Khalid specifically. I don't think, but the reason I say this is because in the regular split, they've gotten away with support and jungle underperforming, just because in the end they team fight super well. But I think in this series, Kalist was underwhelming by his own standard, which happens. It's not a knock on him as a player. But in the end, the main thing is they couldn't really outmuscle them out of out of game states. If you think back, even KC versus Koi, when they played, the way KC beat Koi in a game where they were super far behind was because Kalist flash E'd on MF on a Sivir that was out of position, who had no flash, and then there was a big turnaround when Koi was like 6k gold ahead in the regular split, and that's like, oh, Koi throwing a lead again, haha, you know? But I think also KC, in terms of their prep work, I think that something that really stood out to me was that they didn't really find ways to disrupt the support pool of Alvaro. I think Alvaro is very effective on a specific pool of champions. And I really think that you need to interrupt that. Really you need to interrupt that. He concentrates his champion picks around very certain ones. I would say this top 6 here is what I like put him on. Obviously, I had the Renata game here yesterday, which was kind of weird. Renata Kaiser in that game. It was fine in the end. They found some combos, but I thought that the melee super would just make more sense there. In my mind, you need to open up your bans, create a scenario where you don't end up banning mid laners in the 1, 2, 3, and also not banning Gwen. I think that you should be inviting answers, and I think that you should attack the support and jungle pool. That's what you really want to attack. If you're in a situation where your mid laner, who is considerably better than the enemy mid laner, gets the weaker champion in the game, I would be quite unhappy. I think this is a good example of what I wanted to say about Koi, is in this particular game, Braum Nami is out. No idea why they didn't look for Milio here when enemy is showing Maokai. It was very strange. But they went for Karma. If you push Alvaro, I think that's the main thing you want to do. You want to push Alvaro to see where he lands in the support department. I think that's like the main thing you want to look out for. Push him, see what happens in terms of the support pool. I think you need to create space in the 1, 2, 3 to actually ban junglers and supports above anything else. I just think that if I look at KC's bans in the 1, 2, 3, I think they are really whatever. I don't think they actually give them any value. Like here, it's fine because they are setting up for the own first pick, and that's okay. But I didn't like the opening Talia ban. I think it's better for them to trade mid laners if it comes down to it, and then, you know, put themselves in a position where bans are actually freed. Because I look at this and I can only highlight one game really where I think that he has the higher quality mid laner, and even that game is of course arguable because Akali is a good answer into Yone. This was a game that Kana needed to bail out in the end. I don't know what the situation is with Kana's contract, but Europe should be so happy that Kana is playing here. First and foremost, KC, the fact that they found this gem Kana and hired him as a mercenary when he was discarded by the LCK. I think this is the type of player that Kana, you know, I can see a world where Kana rejoins like T1 next year. That's the level Kana is operating under. I can see a world where Kana, reaches the moon and back. I think Kana is playing some of the best League of Legends this year that he has ever played, which is super cool. Yeah, the Kana story is kind of sad because apparently Kana claimed that he was promised a certain amount and a certain contract, but the person who promised that verbally passed away in T1. So it was just a very strange situation altogether. If this information is true, because I don't remember how this information was sourced, I do think that that's something that you can get past in the end. You know, I think that's not a big issue, but I can see where it kind of goes back to the LCK. Well, Koi, I think in their series against G2, I think G2 just found probably like their best form. I think G2 played better here than they did against Fnatic. I think against Fnatic, they gave a lot of opportunities, but at the same time, they are not under that same amount of pressure. I think that G2 has made massive strides in the jungle support department. I don't think that it's as visible against Fnatic because I think the first 15 minutes, first 20 minutes, I think Fnatic's jungle support play is like still really, really insane. You know, like Fnatic couldn't close out winning positions, but they got into insanely winning positions because their jungle and supports are completely cracked out of their mind. And G2 had moments where they were competing with that. But I think what stood out to me is that they're actually making plays on side. They're getting the solo laners ahead, and BB and Caps are actually looking like themselves. There seems to be a very, very big effort and big push behind making G2 a Caps-centric team again, which I think is super, super good. Someone in chat said Labrov had crazy hooks on Nord versus Fnatic, and I think the main thing there is he had crazy hooks, but he also had teammates in place to make those hooks, you know? People were bought in. Skumon actually invested time to being on the mid wave, and Labrov and Skumon were actually on the same screen. Because if your jungler says, I want to farm, I want to clear my camps, you're not going to have opportunities to hook in. You're not going to have opportunities to be proactive. And I think that that idea of syncing is something that every team kind of battles with, and they figured out how to do that in their own way. And I think that G2 have made clear strides in this department. In the end, G2, they lost one game here with the Braum Zaya because they were, of course, picking Braum because they expect the melee spot to get with Kaiser, with Rakan out. They picked Gwen, which I think was a little bit more experimental. This was a game where you could see some suffering from G2's side. Kaiser, Yon Rumble as a combo is a classic. I think Trundle picking it this early is a little bit tricky. I wonder at this point what kind of AD junglers are still in the pool. So Nafiri was picked, and then Vi is perma-banned, and here Wukong was locked out, Pantheon's locked out. Like, this is the type of game where like you need an AD jungle. I wonder if you should just be willing to play something like Nocturne here. Because Pantheon out, Vi out, Nafiri out. Like, Nocturne is probably a stronger blind than Trundle, you know? And then you have options on 5. There's also the conversation of Xin Zhao. Xin Zhao is also available, but I can see why you wouldn't want to pick Xin Zhao against Yon Rumble. Like, your ultimate value is very minimal. Arguable against Rumble, I guess, but most of the time you're not picking Xin Zhao into melee compositions. But I think Nocturne would probably be a little bit better. Then the Lilia comes through as a good answer into Trundle, and then Annie on 5, because honestly there's nothing else to pick. Nothing else to pick. And then in the final one, I think it's just the G2 classic. I guess this is the good side of BB, you know? It's so easy to complain about BB's counter picks when they are losing or when he's underperforming. But games like these is where you're like, oh, damn, this Swain is going to run this game, isn't he? And G2 just set up for the Maokai first pick. They slammed Blitzcrank for the combo, Maokai Blitzcrank. This is a Labrov classic. When things flow for G2, things flow for G2. Fair play on the bounce back. I think the biggest difference, I really, really want to highlight how big of one simple thing, how big of a difference that can make. And I think that's what makes this playoff race so damn close. Because I think in terms of calling the winner, I think it's easy to say that G2 is the favorite because they're in the finals. But I think in terms of winning a best of 5 on the day, I still see qualities in Fnatic that are extremely, extremely good in terms of their early game. I think nobody can compete there. If they can figure out how to be less trigger happy and Humanoid to just play a little bit more conservative in terms of playing around information, that could be super, super good. Like, Humanoid should know he has a target on his back, and Razor should learn how to keep it in his pants. The Humanoid should posture when he has the mage to actually, poke and actually leverage his gold leads, like in the Orianna game and, of course, the Hwei game. If they figure that out, the difference between Fnatic being great and bad is right there, because the same thing happened with G2, right? In terms of the jungle support, just playing together and finding windows together, that has enabled everyone on the team to actually perform a lot better, in particular the solo lanes. But I have to say, in terms of I don't want to simplify it just as much as that, because I do think additionally that G2 in the solo lanes are playing a lot better. Like BB and of course Caps, they were running their lane matchups, especially in the Fnatic series. And not necessarily the lane matchup in mid maybe, but in terms of playing side, like for example that Ari game, the fact that G2 Caps managed to solo kill Talia twice. This is greatness from Caps, but also laziness from Humanoid, you know? Laziness from Humanoid. But I think in terms of the prep work, G2 did a better job of targeting the right things, I think. Because I mentioned, you know, you need to target jungle, you need to target support, and in terms of what they did, Maokai Vi Gwen, and then Maokai Vi Rakan, they are targeting the champions that are going to, of course, give the enemy the connective tissue, so to speak, in the composition. Because I think that's what Alvaro and Elioy are. You need to hit them in the support jungle department, thin out their pool there. Because if you don't, Koi is a very, very respectable team. I think the final thing I wanted to add in terms of Koi, they deserve a lot of props for their prep work in this one. My understanding is Melzit is off his parental leave, and he was on stage. He stole the belt from Spawn, and he showed up and Koi performed, which is super, super good. And I think Super also had a standout performance. I think Super had a really, really good performance. I think KC, in this pursuit of finding new layers of themselves, I think they did lose a lot of the good parts of themselves. So KC, they lost against G2 in the last playoff run too. I don't think you can discount KC at all. KC, I think also, if they put more priority on making sure that mid lane pool is, like that the mid lane champion that they land on is a very, very good one, I think things are going to look up for them. I think it's going to be a different thing. I think if Kalis has a better performance on the day, I think also it's going to look up and things are going to look better for them. I think the main concern for KC, because there's an issue that's been lingering in the split, is that we've had the occasional underperformances from the jungle support duo in terms of how cohesively they play. And maybe this is something that is coming back to bite them now, because while they had a decent ending series and decent ending to the regular split after, you know, landing first, some of the issues that we saw became, you know, an issue here too. Because I do think that Koi played cohesively, and I think that Koi don't give up as much gold and can actually play winning position when it comes to sacking the dragons. And I think that simplification has made Koi, you know, a much better team. In regards to where we are right now in terms of predicting the playoffs, I think the easy thing is to predict G2 as the winner because they are already in the finals. But we've seen that in the past, and I think that we have a top four that is extremely, extremely competitive. I think in terms of mental fortitude, KC have shown that they can bounce back. Koi is a team that has always taken opportunity to beat teams that are on paper better than them when they underperform. I love that confidence about Koi. Fnatic, I guess, is the biggest question mark. The dreaded word potential. Is Fnatic going to be what I said? Have they peaked in high school and now they are, sharing stories of how they played American football on the school grounds and they had a scholarship, but they couldn't fulfill that scholarship because they didn't have the right grades? Or will they actually, do something impactful here? I've said it many times, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me for the 52th time. I don't know who will, shame on the whole world. Shame on the whole Fnatic fan base, me included. And there we go, a little breakdown. We're gonna do a breakdown of the coming matchups, GX and Team Heretics. But we will leave that for a different time because we have LPL coming up.